to Jake Jackets. Gear up to fire the cannon and hit the ice with your host, Jay Ashdown and Jake Gehringer.
She's such a sweet dog. She's got so much energy, and I love watching her. The only complaint that I have is she never gets tired, which isn't necessarily a complaint, but because she doesn't get tired, the thing I have to do to tire her out is throw the ball around the house. And every third or fourth time I throw the ball, she usually gets it and she'll bring it back to me. But every once in a while she'll bring it back and then nudge it under the couch and then look at me like, "You're gonna get that, right?" And I'm just like, "No, get your fucking ball."
That's Jag.
I know you can put your paws in there. I've seen you do it. You're gonna do it. I'm not getting this ball for you.
that is Jag in a nutshell. He's the same way with playing fetch, or he'll play tug of war with me and almost try to rip my arm off.
Or if you're outside, there's this one low hanging tree, so you have to kind of bend down or almost kind of angle yourself to use your foot to get the ball. She'll always go under that tree and just drop the ball and look at you "Yeah, I'm gonna make you work for this."
Anyway, hey, pencils down. We're here. We're back for let me hit you with some knowledge. Because this is Hockey 101 day, everybody.
Yeah.
I had this little idea. I'm just gonna come straight out with this. I had this idea from a manager because I would talk about this show at work and just be it's fun and we're doing the thing. And I would mention certain things about the sport, and he was like, "I'm gonna be real with you, dude. I know nothing about how hockey works."
Yeah, fair.
So this is, we've got hardcores in our little space. We've got casuals in our little space. This is for y'all.
Yeah, we get new people, and on top of us trying to talk about reasons that new people should try and watch the Blue Jackets, there's plenty of reasons for new people to watch the sport. So
just watch hockey,
yeah.
But first and foremost, the first lesson is not actual betting advice, but some kudos.
Some kudos, okay.
Kepi Keeper is brought to you by our buddies at DraftKings Sportsbook.
I wasn't actually sure if we were going to do this or not because I didn't think we were doing any Blue Jackets recaps, but we're
not doing recap, but we still got to give our shout outs as much as we could try.
Shout outs.
And all you got to do,
easy.
All you got to do, bet the ice or bet the action on the ice, excuse me. Sure, bet the ice if you want to, but do it with DraftKings Sportsbook. Do it with DraftKings Sportsbook. We're looking at the lines for the next couple days. Wednesday. We got some interesting little matchups going on today, and because we'll talk about the scheduling later in the lesson. But
the two games that I'm interested in tomorrow would be Bruins Devils and then Jets Kings.
Yeah, that'll be fun because
return.
Bruins Devils, Devils are finally starting to get some mojo back.
Yeah, they just needed goaltending, so they've been able to get some goaltending these last few games. 4-2, 2-1. Their 1-1 at Vancouver though was 6-5. So
this is interesting to me. I have never seen a money line where both teams are at a negative.
Yeah, I mean that's if it's minus 115 probably.
Yeah, for the Devils.
Yeah, that's literally basically just a pick 'em.
That's interesting. I've just never seen money lines where they're both in a negative.
Yeah.
So that just caught my eye. And then Kings and Jets. That's a fun one between the two Western divisions. And it's the Velarde goal.
Exactly. It's Velarde, Iafallo, then PLD. Yeah.
We got some fun ones in there, and the Jets are the underdogs. They're a plus 150 to a minus 180 for these rolling road warriors that are your Los Angeles Kings here. So do with that what you will. But first, you got to download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-3669. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gambling resources. NHL and NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights reserved. Okay. I'm just looking at the picture of Milo again. I saved it to share with others.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's just such a cute dog. Anyway, so Kepis, yes. Even though the team is literally falling apart at the seams.
I don't know if either one of us have to go first here. I feel like we're gonna have the same answer here.
We might.
I think we are. Because I know that he came from Cleveland, but don't start the buses. Start the Jets.
Oh yeah, let's take flight, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, come on. He balled out in both starts, even though they lost the second one. He's phenomenal, and he played well last year. The one game he got against Toronto too. Like, he's interesting. He's really interesting. He's put himself into the fold here for the future of the Blue Jackets in terms of goalies. There's kind of an uncertainty around him because there wasn't much risk. He was an undrafted kid, but he just keeps playing well.
Jet Greaves is an interesting case, especially since Tarasov has now officially kind of returned. So Terry is back from his conditioning stint, and they sent Jet back down to Cleveland to play with Pavel. So we'll see what those two kids can do up by 71, while the Monsters just keep rolling.
The Monsters keep rolling, and Jet Greaves is a big part of that. Let me pull this up real quick here. Yeah, looking at it, last year he had a start against the Leafs, had a .939 save percentage. The 2 games he played this year for the Blue Jackets, he had a .935.
Wow.
I know it's only 3 games, but I mean,
but sample size is like, yeah.
There's something to be said about that,
Getting his first win, especially because Elvis is still sick, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens now that we have Spencer and Terry. And then when Elvis comes back, you said this, Hedger relayed this from Yarmo. They are probably just going to carry all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that with our first lesson here. But Kepi, Jet Greaves, let's take flight with Jet when the time comes again. We'll see what they can do when they need him again.
So, minor breaking news. We don't need to go into too much depth about it, but the Washington Wizards and Capitals are expected to build a new arena in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, they're moving to Alexandria, which is just beyond the border.
So they're going to be playing in Alexandria, Ovechkin.
Wow. That's our first lesson, people, is lessons in bad puns. And that we can just...
Oh, you don't even need a lesson like from us. You could just watch any episode.
You can literally watch anything. So here's what we're going to do with this, right? I wanted to strip things back because we've been doing this for 3 years, and we talk about stuff like cap management, how rosters work,
how we talk
about this like it's
yeah
we talk about this like we're geniuses. and we're not. But we're fans that just know what we're talking about because we've
we're just guys. That's it.
We're just guys, and you know how guys are when they get so deep ingrained into a sport that they love.
Yeah, like the typical guy thing. You sit around and you just say names of former players who like haven't played in a while, and you're just like, oh yeah, that dude.
Yeah, where you pull out a tungsten Armo Doyle stat.
Yeah. No, that's my favorite thing to do.
Speaking of, we could compare the Shohei contract like late in the show if you want, but
I don't even. That's a whole other can of worms.
That is a whole other can of worms, isn't it? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do like basic roster and team structure first, and then we're gonna try our best to explain basic rules of the game, how certain penalties work, and do an overview of that. And then we're gonna get into the NHL as a whole and how that governing body works and how the season works. Because my mom is always like, hockey never ends for you, does it? And it kind of doesn't.
Yeah. It's a long season. Let's get into it.
So rosters. The very basics of a roster is that you carry 23 players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made up of forwards on offense, defensemen, and goalies.
Yeah.
You break it up within those three sections. You have 12 forwards, play on 4 forward lines, right? And there's 3 positions on the ice.
Yes.
You have your wingers, play on the left, play on the right, and then you have your center.
Yeah. And then you got your 3 defensive pairs. So that's 6 defensemen. So those 2 guys are lined up on a pair. Sometimes a team can go with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, which does happen from time to time in the regular season.
There's actually 2 of those games going on tonight when we're recording this.
Yeah, it's not something you're going to see often in the playoffs, I think. But, sometimes a team may decide to roll with 7 defensemen to maybe ease the workload of one of their defensemen. And another thing it does is if one of your defensemen get hurt or kicked out of the game, you can roll with 6.
Or if one of your forwards gets hurt.
Yeah, I think like for me, like I don't mind the 11-7 because it gives you more versatility because you can argue that having that 7th defenseman is more important than having that extra forward. So, but the basics of it is heading into a game, you're going to have 18 players, skaters.
Yes.
And then your 2 goalies.
You have your starting goaltender, which normally gets the workload of, or the bulk of the workload throughout the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
And like Steve Dangle says, there's so many games.
Yes, there's a lot of games. So it's crazy. Like, and we've seen the workloads drop for goalies too. Mm-hmm. Ideally, your starting goalie is starting 55 to 60, maybe 65 games.
Yeah,
how unbelievable they are.
Unless you're Vassy and you're playing like 70.
We saw the Oilers start Cam Talbot 73 times in a season, which was nuts, and it hurt him in the long run.
Yeah, it did. Even though he's playing phenomenally well with the Kings this year.
Because he's not a one-year deal. He only plays well now on one-year deals.
We'll get to the cap at the end, but like, yeah, you have your starter who plays the bulk of the time, and then you have your backup, which normally sits on the bench with the ball cap, and if the starter gets hurt, they'll come in relief, and then they'll take starts to give your regular starter rest, right?
Yeah, you'll see them in back-to-backs more often than not. You'll see them come in relief if your starting goalie gives up a few goals. If the coach decides that they're not playing well, or if they just need to send a message to the team, that works too. So
unless you're Patrick Waugh, we can talk about the. Did you want to talk about that Patrick Waugh story? We don't really need to.
No, we don't need to.
It's such an infamous story. Patrick Waugh leaving Montreal.
The gist of it is they were getting blown out by a team, and the head coach didn't take him out of the game, which he would have preferred to have been taken out of the game because it was ridiculous how long they left him in,
especially after 5. Right, yeah. That's what they originally wanted. This is the 90s.
Yeah, he was so pissed off. He requested a trade. He was like, "I'm done.
Live on the bench.
I'm sick of playing for you guys."
Yeah, because before the glass behind the bench, which started with or at least the glass and the netting, which started in the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have that like directly behind the bench. So he was able to go right up to the president of the team and tell him straight up, I'm not playing again.
Yeah. It's nuts.
So that's basically, your 23-man roster.
Sometimes teams will carry 3 goalies. You're required to carry at least 2. But more often than not, you're just going to carry 2 so you have more flexibility. So you can have 21 guys on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, more often than not, you're going to carry at least 7 defensemen.
Right.
Just for depth purposes.
Right. And that's pretty much it when it comes to how you actually structure your team and your roster.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, like, your wingers are more of your scoring forwards.
Yeah.
But you have centers that can score a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid. You have very offensively gifted goal-scoring centers, guys that play right in front of the net, can tip pucks in, things like that.
Yeah.
And there's the whole, like, if you just look at the rink as a whole, right? You have your 3 zones. If we're getting like into the nitty-gritty of
the nitty-gritty,
basics, right?
You have your 3 zones. So you have your neutral zone is the one in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have your offensive zone and your defensive zone.
And those are divided by blue lines.
Where you're trying to score. Defensive zone, you're trying to keep the puck out of your net. And, more often than not, games played in the neutral zone.
Yeah, it's very much...
See, who can get possession and who can create something offensively.
It's very much like, especially when there's long periods in between whistles, there's a lot of neutral zone turnover.
So one thing is you can only have 5 skaters and the goalie on the ice at all times. Players will be doing line changes in the middle of the game. Normally, strategically, you're trying to put the puck in positions where you can successfully change lines without being caught defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second period, because you change sides where you're shooting, that's the period of the long change.
Right.
A lot harder to change because where your bench is in the second period into comparison to where you have to come off the ice and where you're trying to skate, it's a lot harder to change without getting caught. So that's
right.
Another factor in the game.
And that's why, especially in the second period, because shift length is a thing. Obviously, when you're a skater like this, when you're ice skating, you got to remember the basic idea of this game is you're around on knife shoes with blades that are like super razor thin.
Mm-hmm.
You get tired and you're skating at like 20 plus miles an hour. So of course you're going to get tired after only about a minute.
Yeah. More often than not, you'll see forwards try and go in that 40-second to 55-second, I'd say, kind of range for shifts.
Defensemen probably about
maybe a little bit further, maybe like 50 seconds to a minute, I'd say. Sometimes a little over a minute, depending on the circumstances. But because your defensemen are logging more minutes than your forward, especially guys who are playing on the top pair. Those guys are playing probably at least 22, 23 minutes a night.
Upwards, like some of the best play upwards of 25 plus.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
Elite, the cream of the crop.
It's ridiculous how long some of these guys can go out there.
Creme de la creme.
The creme de la creme, indeed. It's definitely like ice time is something that is very up and down game to game, depending on where you are in the lineup. And like I said, when it comes to how players play, your wingers are generally more of your scoring type.
Yeah.
They put up way more goals on average than a center does. And a center, because you're in the middle and you're controlling the majority of the ice surface, that's where your playmakers are going to be and your passers.
Yeah, you know, you can get playmakers on the wings too and goal scorers at center, but generally speaking, as you said, you know, that those guys are your anchors. Those guys are the ones who really drive everything. You know, if you're thinking like who's the quarterback on the ice at all times, it's almost always going to be your center. So a lot of them are engines. Things kind of run through them.
It's about a very
position. You know, when you think about, like, we talk about this all the time, especially with the Blue Jackets. It is, you know, the best teams in the league are strong down the middle.
Yes.
And that's one of the things the Blue Jackets haven't been good these last few years. They've really lacked that top end talent and depth down the middle. And that's the one thing that they've been constantly looking for.
When you think about the greatest names in the game, right? How many of them are centers and how many of them are wingers?
Yeah, I mean, Crosby, Draisaitl. I know Draisaitl can't play wing, but he's a center. McDavid, you know, Matthews.
You go back in time and you go to Gretzky. You go to Lemieux.
Yeah.
You go to Datsuk. Yeah. The majority of those guys are centers because they drive everything.
Yeah.
They work the most areas of the ice.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to, is just how much of the ice surface do these positions actually cover.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Especially because it's 200 feet long.
We also could have mentioned Gretzky there.
Yeah. I didn't want to go the obvious place, but
yeah. We probably could have mentioned him. He's kind of important.
He's kind of pretty important. And I mean, like I said, I tried to mention Messier, Lemieux, guys from the past, how being on the wing, being one of those rare exceptions, playing as a winger, right?
Yeah.
And then your defense usually play back more, obviously.
They have to play back more, yeah. Some, you know, there are offensive-minded defensemen in the league who will jump up to try and make plays. If you're watching the Blue Jackets, if you're new to this, Zach Werenski is one of those guys who's really good at it. But you have to be careful because there's obvious risk involved with that. You want to be solid in your position, make sure that you're reading everything, keeping everything in front of you. The best defensive cores in the NHL, best defensive teams in the NHL, always keep things in front of them. It's important. It's really important.
It's very important, especially when you're like, and it's hard to read too, especially in the moment, because when you think about it from a practical standpoint, right? And not just from like analytics or whatever, when you're just thinking about it from a player's point of view, think about what you're playing with. You're not playing with a ball.
Playing with a puck.
A puck is like a weird cylindrical disc, like made out of rubber.
Yeah.
That's like as hard as a rock.
Trust me, those things are hard.
Especially when those guys are shooting
to the kneecap before.
Yeah, we're speaking to a resident goalie expert here.
Not fun if your pad opens up and you get it square on the knee. I've had that before. It's maybe the worst pain I've ever felt. The worst part about it was, Jake, I gave up a goal on the rebound.
Oh no!
It was either my first or second start. It happened, and it just like it knocked me, and like I literally couldn't move. It was right there. He put it in. I was like, God, what a horrific 5-second period that was.
But like that's why we call these forward positions the way we call them: left wing, right wing, center, because they generally have their area that they cover.
They're covering a whole lot of ground. They have to keep things in front of them because, as we mentioned, the whole disc thing, those things kind of bounce. So it's ideal to keep those in front of you because you want to be able to control them as best as you can to prevent turnovers and odd man chances the other way.
They're very bouncy for something that's as tough as it is.
Yeah. It's surface is what it is.
Yeah, because I didn't know. I don't know if anybody knows this, but ice is kind of slippery.
Yeah, yeah. It's an incredible combo. And then obviously your goalies, the number one rule, our buddy Steve Dangle loves to say it, the number one rule, tend the goal.
If you're a goaltender, tend the goal. And let's explain this in terms of
trying to stop the puck from going in the net. It's very simple. I think most people can figure that out.
Yeah. Most people can, and then you watch a game and you watch a guy stroll out and you're like, where are you going?
Yeah, so that's another thing. Late in the game, if you're down a goal or two and you want to try and provide some offense, you can pull the goalie, bring him to the bench, bring on an extra skater, because you have 6 players on the ice at all times. So take off the goalie, you could bring on a 6th skater. That's
right.
all it is. But also, like, when there's a delayed penalty, if a team commits a penalty, play stops when that team possesses the puck. So the other team will go to the power play. They'll go up a player. That player who takes the penalty will come off. In that time period, the goalie will go to the bench because they can't score, because if they possess the puck, play's dead. So in that time period of, they just took a penalty. Well, we're trying to score a goal here. Might as well bring on another player.
Right. Keep possession as long as we can, and if we score, then that's great. One last thing before we actually get into like rules and penalties and things, and this is probably going to be the bulk of this. The ice surface itself. We mentioned the 3: the offensive, the neutral zone, defensive zone. There's way more to it than that, because you have your 2 blue lines where you cross in between zones.
Oh God, this is gonna be a bitch.
Offside's gonna be a fun one. You have your red line, which is
right. Man, Duchesne.
Yeah. You have your red line, which is right in the center. That's generally where your opening face-off for every period is taken.
Yeah, that's really all it is nowadays, because it used to be a different thing in the 90s when you had the 2-line pass. Now it's not a thing anymore. So
yeah, and you have basically you have like 6 other places generally where you can take face-offs.
Yeah, left, right, center, and then you got the 4 different places in the neutral zone you can take it.
You have 4 dots in the neutral zone, right, to each side of the blue line, which is generally where you do that for an offside. And then you have your zone draws, which are indicated by hash marks and big old circles.
Yeah.
Which, where if you watch Alex Ovechkin highlights, that's where that guy likes to score a lot.
There's 9 total places you can take a face off. Yeah. Easy enough.
Easy enough to explain, like, just the ice surface in general, isn't it? But the big thing, and this goes back to Jay's old pastime, is behind the net, the net line, and the trapezoid.
Oh God. Okay, so do we just want to get into icing?
I think we could talk about icing, yeah, and the trapezoid at the same time.
So the trapezoid is a very dumb thing that we have in the NHL because of this guy Marty Brodeur.
He was okay.
So if you play the puck behind the net as your goal as a goaltender, that's legal. You can go behind your net to stop the puck. Generally speaking, that's why goalies do it. They want to just stop the puck so their defenseman can come in and pick it up. That way it's laying flat. It's easier for you to break out, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes goalies turn the puck over and they get scored on. That's why Steve Dingle says 10 the goal. But generally speaking, behind the net, no big deal.
You settle play down and you
try to... This isn't really a common thing as much nowadays because everybody's so used to it. But outside of that trapezoid that's behind the goal, if the goalie plays the puck in the corner behind the goal line, not in the trapezoid, it's a penalty for some stupid reason.
That is a delay of game call.
Yeah, they really delayed the game when they played that puck.
Yeah.
I think it's stupid, but it's a rule, I guess. But then again, like I don't feel too strong about it because it doesn't really affect things that much nowadays.
Well, especially because goalies don't serve penalties, which can you imagine?
Would be funny. It would be very easy to score. But icing, as we mentioned earlier, sometimes teams want to make sure when they're changing lines that they put the puck in positions to where it's convenient and easy to get a line change without fears of play coming back in their direction, getting caught napping, and potentially giving up a scoring chance. So if you're behind the red line at center ice, if you push the puck forward into the other end and it goes behind the goal line and the other team gets to it first, that's icing.
That's what's called icing, yes.
Cannot change lines. Any player who's on the ice when that happened has to stay out, and a face-off is in your defensive zone.
So it's red, blue, goal.
Mm-hmm.
It has to cross all three of those lines, and you have to be beaten by the defensive team.
And you dump the puck in, you're golden. The puck just has to be ahead, and you have to be beyond that red line to dump the puck in. So, sometimes it gets a little cheap and easy. Not every play do you see guys really fully cross it. It's more often than not really egregious if you see it. But the reason for this is because you don't want to have teams just dumping the puck back and forth into other zones and not trying to create anything offensively, which can create some boring hockey. So, we're trying to ensure that, when teams are trying to get their line changes, that they're at least pushing things ahead in order to do it.
And it's a good punishment to have the, infracting team stay on.
Yes, I think so. And real quick note, if you're on the penalty kill, if you're down at least one player via penalty, that rule goes away for you.
Yes, when you clear the puck all the way down the ice, it's fine.
It's fine.
As long as you're killing a penalty.
Yeah. Which, could you imagine if that wasn't a rule?
Oh.
Power plays.
Power plays would suck.
Yeah.
Power plays would go on for at least 5 minutes on a 2-minute minor.
I think that's probably why they do it more than anything, is because they just they don't want power plays to last like 10 years.
And that kind of gets us into the penalty talk, which I mentioned minors, right? So there's minor penalties and there's major penalties.
There's also the rare double minor.
The rare double minor, and we can talk about double minors when we get to like stick infractions. But then there's also like game misconducts and 10-minute misconducts, which are sometimes one and the same. Yeah.
That always confuses me. I'm not
gonna lie. When you call a 10 and a game and they're still playing, and why?
It's like, what? Just throw them out. Like
would it just be a 10 on the score sheet? And then it's like, how, what?
Yeah.
It's very strange sometimes because, as we'll get into, fans, league, players, officials, a lot of us don't even know what's going on, even when we do know what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of times I kind of just watch, and sometimes if I don't understand something, I just kind of ignore it and wait for someone else to explain it.
If they even know it themselves.
Yeah. Like sometimes I'll see someone gets a 10-minute misconduct and then they play later in the game, and I'm just like, I guess they're still playing.
Yes, that's not an actual ejection. Yeah. And we have a relevant story to talk about when it comes to that kind of thing. So minors, stick infractions is probably the most popular.
I don't know if I want to say,
or at least relevant.
Common, yeah.
Common, yeah. So that involves things like tripping, which is taking your stick in between a player's skates. Obviously, tripping is a little more self-explanatory than anything.
Trip them. That's easy.
Yeah. Now, here's a question for you.
Sure.
Explain to me the difference between Oh my gosh, what is it? Hooking and high sticking.
Well, hooking is like you're trying to, go after a player's stick. You can be trying to lift their stick. Lifting someone's stick is a very common way of trying to depossess a player of a puck. I'd say it's more popular than trying to just get in there with your stick. It's a lot easier to trip a guy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just lift their stick and force them a little bit off the puck, get them out of rhythm, etc., even if you're not depossessing them fully, you're making an impact on the play. Hooking is you're trying to make the play with your stick to get in there, and instead it's literally like a hook. Your
Yeah, the
stick.
blade of your stick
But
grabs
you try and get
somebody.
it grabs them. It can grab their arm. It can grab their hip. If it grabs anywhere on the player and impedes their progress, that's a hooking penalty. High sticking, however, sometimes when you're trying to lift those sticks, you miss. And sometimes when that happens, you whack a dude in the face.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this real quick. Easy peasy. 2-minute penalty, that's a minor. High sticking, this is the only case I think where you can get a double minor.
Slashing is a double.
Slashing too. If you hit someone with your stick, essentially, whether if it's a slash or a high stick.
And the slash is different because a high stick is when you're lifting it up.
Yeah.
And a slash is when you're going across or down.
Yeah. So if you make that contact and they're bleeding, your action causes them to bleed. That's a 4-minute penalty. That's 2 minor penalties. So, say a team scores in the first minute 59 of that power play. The rest of that first penalty is canceled. It goes down to 2 minutes. That's an important.
You're still on another power play.
It's an important thing that we didn't say. If you score on a power play, the penalty's over.
Yes.
So double minor is essentially just back-to-back power plays.
Right. And it's different for a major.
Major is only 1 more minute. It's 5 minutes, but you can score as many times as you would like on a major.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Your power play stays intact for the full 5 minutes of a major.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody says, so we have the stick infractions. We have other like bodily infractions like boarding or holding.
I think is pretty self-explanatory. You're holding the player and impeding their progress, and that's
like actually wrapping around them with your arm.
Yeah, or even just holding them against the boards after they no longer have possession of the puck. There's different ways that you can hold a player to get called for it. So that's another penalty. Slashing, we already mentioned. Boarding and hit from behinds are 2 different things, but they're kind of one and the same.
Kind of. And here's where we can get into Cousins and Goodbranson for a second.
Yeah, the former Panther. And Nick Cousins was drafted with the draft pick that the Blue Jackets gave the Flyers in the Jeff Crow trade.
Ugh.
Yeah. The circle of life, isn't it?
The circle of mediocre hockey players.
That's being kind.
So just to get into the story itself, Columbus was playing Florida just the other day. There's a play that happens where Cousins takes Goodbranson and hits him from behind.
Yeah, into the boards. Filthy play. It's bad when a player like Eric Goodbranson goes down the way that he did. But the funniest part was he's Eric Goodbranson, so he gets back up and he's stripping the shit out of him.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole thing that's got everybody up in arms is what we talk about all the time with this new review rule. Because you can review certain penalties, but you also can't review others for some reason.
Yeah, it's kind of like football in that sense. Like, oh, this is a play that we can't review, and it's like, why are some plays reviewable but some plays aren't? Whatever.
Yeah, anyway. Why? What's the problem with this? So basically, what they did was they called the 5-minute major for boarding on Cousins,
and then they overturned it.
They took a look at it, and then they reduced it to a 2.
And then Eric at Branson took matters into his own hands.
Yeah.
And he just started, just in the middle of a play, he hits the dude, and then he's like, screw where the puck went. I'm just going to beat the shit out of you.
No, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you.
Yeah.
And that, it devolves into a whole other conversation about how officiating, is bogus.
Games.
Essentially.
Because Eric doesn't have to do that if Nick Cousins gets removed from the game.
Right. And if it was any worse, Goody said it himself.
Mm-hmm.
If he would have led a little bit higher up,
yeah,
right, probably would have bashed his face in, and who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. That probably just would have made Branson angrier.
Or you could end up like Barclay Goodrow and have pieces of your jaw missing.
That was wild. He didn't miss.
Did you hear about that? He's in the lineup tonight.
He didn't miss any teeth, but his jaw is in pieces.
Yeah, it's really creepy. And this is why, like, we love this sport, don't get me wrong, but there are some ugly, like, it can be a graphic sport.
Yeah, but and the other thing is, like, we talk about the hockey players being tough. I think people talk about it as like a positive, and I'm not saying that it's not a positive, but sometimes I feel like there's a line. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a day off of work because you broke your jaw.
Yeah, there's a difference between being tough and going back out there immediately and being stupid.
Yeah. So that was
and not taking care of yourself. Like, Boone just broke his jaw in a game or two ago.
Yeah, he's out 6 weeks. Good for you, man. Take your vacation.
But that's just another 6 weeks, man. That's another really big blow, especially losing our captain like that.
Yeah, a lot of big blows these last 2 years, so we're used to it at this point, I think.
I think so. And everybody always talks about the old adage, oh, I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out.
Yeah, sometimes you get fights. They're not as common as they used to be.
Get way more roughings and scrums.
Get way more roughings and scrums. If two players actually drop their gloves and start fighting, it's a 5-minute major for both those guys. But
sometimes a 2-minute instigator is tagged on.
Yeah.
Depending on how the fight begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, fighting's kind of going away, which I don't mind.
I mean, it's fun to get to see an odd fight, especially in person.
That's the thing, like, I'm thinking about right now. It's like, I've been to a lot of games. I can't remember the last time I saw a fight in person. They're really not that common.
They're definitely not as common as they were 30 years ago.
God, yeah.
Even 15 years ago.
So,
right?
Yeah.
What are we missing when it comes to like actual like penalties?
It's funny because I just know someone like is going to get in the comments eventually, be like, how did you miss this penalty? We're going to be like, how did we miss that? Like,
hey, how did, yeah.
If something comes to us, it'll come to us if it's like important. But generally speaking, those are like the main ones that we wanted to talk about.
Are your very basic
infractions. Basic. I'm going to get into the complicated ones, and I'm going to want to rip my hair out talking about these ones.
I mean, can we talk about like illegal yeets and too much man?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a penalty. Too many men on the ice if you have 7 players on the ice.
6.
More often than not, it'll be 6 players plus your goalie.
And that's a bench minor, so that's the difference, right?
You can choose a player to serve that penalty. It doesn't go directly to any one player. So yeah.
And there's a whole reason why, like, there's a whole system for choosing players for bench minors as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you have a player going out there that, did it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's an illegal yeet or a puck over glass delay a game.
Yeah.
We just love calling them illegal yeets because that's fun.
Yeah, of course. The word yeet, you have to.
Oh, yeah. Basically, if they're not a penalty killer, right? if they're one of your lesser known bottom six forwards, that's probably who's more than likely going to serve it.
Or you can even choose a player who doesn't play defense.
Right.
Easy. Maybe if they're offensively skilled and you never use them on the penalty kill, like right now, if you're the Leafs, if you want someone who might have a chance of creating something out of the penalty box, if they're going to go out there and they don't, play defense or do anything on the penalty kill, you could put Max Domi in there.
You could put Domi in there and he can fly right out of the box. And yeah, so because sometimes that does happen. You'll see guys directly go out of the penalty box and, just
there might be a turnover or you get the puck and suddenly, oh man, I'm looking up and there's 1 second left. And oh man, here he comes out of the box. Now let me pass this ahead. And now we have an odd man rush or even a breakaway. And you get a chance that way. So,
right.
Yeah.
And there's all this minutia with power play and penalty kill strategy and things. And
yeah, we're not going to get into advanced strategy today.
Not really. But there is, your general power play is a 5-on-4. You can have 5-on-3s.
You will never have anything less than a 5-on-3, though. Although a 5-on-2 would be kind of fun to watch.
5-on-2 would be hilarious. Or you could have what happened at the wasn't there a Buffalo Senators game that happened a couple of years back where basically there was a big scrum that was happening and the puck was still live, so they just played one-on-one hockey.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was like Tage and somebody or Cousins. Yeah. It was really funny. There's really weird things that can happen like that.
That's the thing. You play so many games, you have so many weird people in this sport. It's a dumb game. Weird things happen.
It's a dumb game, but we love it so much.
Yeah.
And did we want to go into like officiating and the evening up thing? Like, I know we talked about Tim Peel recently.
I think we can just, this isn't even really a conspiracy or anything like that. It was basically confirmed by Tim Peel. More often than not, officials on the ice want to try and keep things as evenly as possible. So you will see makeup calls in games. If maybe there's a penalty that shouldn't have been called, or maybe it was a soft call, we got to try and even it out. Or, we missed a call on this earlier. That's our mistake. So next time something borderline happens from the other team, we're not going to call that, etc. We want to make sure this is even as possible. So, people aren't looking at us and being like, you're biased against this team, and because penalties are so skewed in a game, and it's all BS. Penalties are penalties. You should call all of them, but that's just not the reality of NHL officiating.
Well, it's not the reality of officiating really either, because, we're all human.
Yeah, there's human error. There's nothing wrong with missing a call, but as I said, you miss a call on my team, that sucks, but don't give us a makeup call just because you missed a call. Just move on to the next one.
Right. And you have guys that are more infamous than others when it comes to how they officiate games. And there's a reason why we know names like Tim Peel and Wes McCulley and Graham Skilleter. And
do you know why makeup calls are a dumb concept, Jake?
Tell me.
Because if I trip and fall as the last line of defense and give a breakaway to the other team and they score, that team isn't going to give us that same break.
Right.
So it shouldn't be that case for officiating. Just because something strange happens or wrong happens, you're not making up for it. Just move on and just get the next one right.
It's such a hard line to ride when you're trying to be very objective.
Yeah.
But there's only two of you. And linesmen, I should say there's 4 officials. There's 2 refs and 2 linesmen.
Mm-hmm.
Referees handle penalties and, calling penalties and stuff like that. Linesmen handle calling offsides, and we're going to end this portion with offsides.
Yes.
And they call icings, and sometimes they can call penalties if a ref really misses it.
Yeah, so let's get into offsides. So once again, this guy Matt Duchene, The puck has to enter the zone first.
Puck has to cross the blue line before your feet do.
Yes. Sometimes players will try and cheat so they can get into the zone as fast as possible with as much momentum as possible.
That's what we like to call cherry picking.
Yeah, cherry picking a little bit. They can try to put themselves in scoring position. If you're offside, if you're, your feet are there before the puck, the goal will be called off.
You can't fully be across the line before the puck comes to you.
Exactly.
That's the long and short of it, right? So the Matt Duchene thing, this is the whole reason why we have this crazy rule about reviewing offsides.
So offsides has always been a rule, but beforehand they didn't do reviews of offside. They changed that because there was a game between Nashville and Colorado about 10 years ago where Matt Duchene, our old buddy, was way offsides, and he knew it, and he slowed down, but the whistle never blew.
He was already at the very least like
he looked around, nobody's around him, everybody has stopped playing.
He's a full 6 feet into the offensive zone.
Yeah. Let me just try and score here, because if they didn't blow the whistle, that's not my problem. He did the right.
Got turned over by the Predators, and then one of his old teammates on Colorado notices that Dutchy's all the way out there.
Mm-hmm.
So he just lobs this giant pass.
Yeah, so it was a major missed call that had people up in arms, and they're pissed.
You could see Barry Trotz behind that Nashville bench going ballistic.
Yeah.
Current general manager of your Nashville Predators.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, that's the long and short of it is, they felt the need to add in reviews. So if you score a goal now and there's question of, oh, maybe they were offside, you can go back and call the goal off. If they were offside, they'll put the clock back to whatever time it was when the offside infraction was committed. Goal be taken off the board. You move on from there. But it does create a little bit of a frustration with fans that we're having games be stopped and altered because a guy might be a quarter of an inch offside.
This is not what this rule was made for.
The whole entire point wasn't to make it into this ticky-tack bullshit. It was to prevent a Matt Duchene instance from ever happening. But the reality of it is I could go back because there's a reason there's only one example of Matt Duchene. It just it rarely happens. Sometimes he missed offsides, but rarely have you ever seen one that bad be missed. It's really only that one.
And it's weird because now we're getting our reviews where they're, and my dad will like this joke. You're 6 inches. You're 6 inches.
Yeah.
These little tiny, and you're looking and you're zooming in at the skate blade and the blue line and where did it touch? Where's
it's just it's a debate. Was he offsides? What did he have possession? And it's just oh my god, can we just play the?
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot when we talk about the old tag-up plays, right?
Yeah.
Talk about Joel Farabee, Kevin Hayes, when we talked about the Val Nichushkin, Cale Makar thing.
The Nichushkin
back in the day
thing was just nuts. I lost my mind watching that because I was just oh my god.
We have an old clip of that somewhere in the channel. Yeah. You can find that.
Because there was just a whole debate, and then we ended up talking about it, and
it didn't make a show because computer stuff didn't work.
Lord, can we just play the freaking game?
Because when you're reviewing these things and they're calling the offices in Toronto from wherever the hell you are, right? And you're taking at the very minimum 5 minutes.
It destroys the whole purpose of why you do this.
There's the flow gets messed up of a game. People are sitting there bored.
Mm-hmm.
Players are like, can we just go back out there and try this?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It's brutal. And that just gets into the league as a whole. I will say the offside thing, I think we covered all the major basic penalties, right?
We did. We did.
Okay, because then there's also really weird stuff that you never see anymore, like Patrick Waugh spinning past Gretzky and
Yeah, that I don't even think we need to talk about that.
no. It's just there's so many incidences from the over 100 years of the NHL where you're creating rules and you're creating how do we do this, and right, we could do a whole hockey history series, right?
Oh, you know what's a big one that we missed penalty-wise? Because we're about to get into this in another sense. Interference.
Interference.
Yeah, so
I tweeted about this. Nobody knows what goalie interference is.
Yeah, so we'll talk about regular interference real quick. Interference is player does not have possession of the puck and you hit them. Simple as that.
Very simple.
Interfering with a player who doesn't have possession of the puck, that's illegal, that's penalty. Goalie interference is, how do we want to say this? I'm trying to think of how to
because we don't even know what it is.
This is the thing that's tough about getting into a sport. You can ask two guys who've watched hockey their whole lives who love the sport. What is goalie interference? Like, how do you define it? And we're sitting here like,
we don't even know.
It's kind of like we're like SpongeBob before he goes into the Friends song. It's kind of what is fun?
Yeah. Like, and trying to explain it is like when Plankton's singing his version of the song, F is for fire that burns down the whole town. So basically, we're going to try this. We promise, because I tweeted that we were going to try to explain this, right? Let's say, I don't know, let's just say Leafs. Yeah, we'll say Leafs Rangers right now, because that's one that's kind of going on right now. And I think that could have something go down. Martin Jones versus Igor Shesterkin. Let's say Leafs are coming in hot on a power play rush. Right, let's say it's 3-on-1. Shesterkin makes a stop. And he's got his glove down on. Right, he's in his crease. Let's say that, I don't know, Morgan Riley comes flying, crashing into the net.
Crashing in, Koopa style. Rah!
Yeah, just as Mr. Virtue would do, right?
Yeah.
And he completely blows Igor up, which uncovers the puck, and they score off of uncovering that puck. That's a very blatant goalie interference.
This is from sportingnews.com, okay? We're going to put this in simpler terms because that's the whole point of this episode.
Explain like I'm 5, right? Yep.
Goalie interference is when an opposing player makes avoidable contact with the goalie either inside or outside of the crease. The play does not necessarily have to result in a goal scored for the call to be made, as goalie interference can also be assessed as a penalty. So the difference between goalie interference as a penalty or as a wipeout for a is, if you score a goal because you're in an area where you're making contact with a goalie, nothing egregious. You're not bumping into him. You're not shoving him to the ground. You're not doing anything. It's as simple as like, I'm rubbing up against the guy.
Yeah, I'm like barely nudging into
myself
you.
In a position where he can't make a move to stop this puck.
And you're in his paint. You're in his blue crease paint.
You're impeding his ability to make the save. That's not a penalty, but it will result in the goal being disallowed. On the other hand, let's say I decide to turn around Sean Avery style, but let's say instead of doing what Sean Avery did back in
waving them stick in his face.
Let's say he actually whacks Marty Brodeur over the head. Now, maybe they'd call it something else other than goalie interference, but
because it's Sean Avery.
Just is if you're doing something egregious to interfere with the goalie, you're making legitimate forcible contact with them.
Yes. That's a penalty on the skater.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that went smoothly.
Smooth as goalie interference explanation
Smoother than I thought it would.
So we say, and like we do this show year round for purposes because we have many hardcore fans that follow the sport year round, because off season kind of is its own season.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why my mom complains and jokes around with me like, boy, you never stop, do you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a long season. It's part of why we like it so much.
Yeah. So
it is a marathon, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. The NHL season, in a regular season that's not like COVID or lockout shortened, right?
82 games.
82 games. You last from the first to second week of October.
Mm-hmm.
And you go all the way through like the first, maybe second week of April.
Yeah.
There are breaks in between for players get days off for holidays. There's a Christmas break coming up where you get
There's a bye week that teams get, like in the NFL.
There is a bye week now.
Yeah, thank God for that. Rarely, it hasn't happened lately. Thanks a lot, Gary and company. But eventually, every once in a while, you'll have an Olympic break.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully we'll get one of those maybe in like 2026.
Maybe in 2040 or some shit like that. Like,
well, we won't get into this too much today, but they are going to do like a test run kind of World Cup to like trial run to go back to the Olympics.
Right. But anyways, you'll have off days and stuff like that.
Practice days, travel days,
etc. Long road trips. Most teams in the National Hockey League love to refer, more often than not on the East Coast, love to refer to the California trip where you face LA, San Jose, Anaheim. You're taking all those teams at once.
Probably go to Vegas too.
Probably go to Vegas these days too, for sure. Maybe.
And then you get the Western Canada trip with maybe a visit to Seattle.
Yep. Yeah. So, you get your 41 home games or your 41 away games. You do have your rare occasion where you have some neutral site games, whether that be outdoor games, whether that be games over in Sweden or Finland or Switzerland.
There are neutral sites where you have like the Winter Classic and the Stadium Series every year now. They are doing Global Series again, which is awesome.
Yeah, I like.
So they have events like this.
Yeah, so that's a really cool thing that they do. Yeah, so I think that's pretty standard, though, generally speaking.
And then the playoffs go from mid-April to June-ish, sometimes even July.
No, never July.
Never July, but it does end like mid.
It's usually like latest it'll be mid-June,
depending on how long your playoff series go.
The good thing is for hockey fans is you don't have to like worry about some complex number equation for the playoffs. Like in baseball, it's like now you have like a best of 3, and then it's a best of 5, and then it's a best of 7. Like no, it's best of 7 straight across the board for all
the way through.
So that's a good thing. But
the only reason it was different in COVID was because of COVID.
Yeah. There's a very dumb playoff system we have, though, to decide seeding, which is stupid and needs to go away.
There's reasons we joke, but we're also half serious when we talk about our gripes with this league.
Oh yeah, we're dead serious. So there's two conferences, Eastern and Western. There's 2 divisions in each conference.
In the West, there's the Pacific and the Central, and in the East, there's the Atlantic and the Metropolitan, which is where Columbus is from.
Yes. So you have 3 teams make it to the playoffs from each division, and then 2 wild cards. So after you take
that's 2 conference wild cards.
2 conference wild cards. Yes. Good distinction. That will determine the seeding. So 2 plays 3 in each division.
Mm-hmm.
And then You have your ones, the team that won both division. Whoever finishes with the better record between those two will play the worst
The second wild card.
Second wild card. And then yeah.
Twos will usually play wild card one.
It's stupid because you can be the fourth best team in your division.
Or no, it would be
that
like
first wild card, but be substantially better than maybe the third or second best team in the other division. And in years past, when it was just seeded 1 to 8, you would just be like the fourth or fifth seed, which now you're basically the seventh.
Do you remember the wild card chaos year?
Which one?
That was Columbus, Carolina, Dallas, and Colorado, and they all won their first rounds, and they were all wild card teams.
Oh yes. So 2019. I got you. I didn't know if you were talking like end of the season when there was like a race to the end for the wild card.
No,
in the actual playoffs. Yeah, no. 2019 was one of the best playoffs we've ever had, in my opinion. I'm just saying that because of Columbus. I'm saying like the Blues won their first title.
all the wild card teams advancing, which was crazy.
They were in last place in January, and they won the cup.
And the Lightning winning the President's Trophy by miles, having the series against Columbus, which were 30 points behind.
Swept in the first round. You had Calgary, who had an unbelievable regular season, getting bounced in 5 by Colorado. Oh. Wasn't expected to make it to the playoffs that year, and just unbelievable playoff that year. And then that year was also the year we had the crazy series between Vegas and San Jose.
Yeah, with the Pavelski injury.
Pavelski, yeah, that playoff was nuts, man. We were really spoiled that year.
We were spoiled that year, and then the world fell apart the next year.
Yeah, Carolina making a fun surprise trip to the Eastern Conference Final, taking down the Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals. I'm not going to harp too much on this, but that year was unbelievable.
And this is why, like, the playoffs every year is some of the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody, there's a reason why the Super Bowl is the most watched thing in America, because the NFL makes so much revenue, and it's
NFL's king. And it's
NFL is king.
I think that's part of why the Super Bowl is as big as it is. It's just because it's one game.
Yeah. Meanwhile, your Stanley Cup final is 7. Best of. But the best hockey that's ever played is best of, game 7s in the Stanley Cup final.
Exactly. Definitely.
Now, that also goes back to the rules a little bit, because playoff hockey versus regular season hockey is a whole other beast.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, like, you have your rule book from October to maybe, like, March?
I'd say until February.
And then they start trimming it down and allowing more things. Like,
yeah, it's like we're adjusting for that playoff jump, and then you see it kind of replicates itself in the series, where games 1 and 2, maybe even game 3 as well, you'll see them be strict on certain penalties, and then by game 4 and the rest of the series, it's just very laxed. Game 7, unless it's a puck over the glass or in a completely egregious play, you're almost never going to see a penalty.
Never. It's just free war zone hockey. It's primal.
It is.
And that's probably why we love it so much, even though we gripe about it. Because here's the thing. What do we always say?
Mm-hmm.
It's the best. It's the best sport.
Best sport, worst league.
Worst league. Yeah. So we covered playoffs. We covered regular season in terms of the schedule. We want to get into the off season, which is the only other reason why this drags.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. We get into off season, which starts, almost immediately after the cup is awarded.
Basically, like, it's like you get like a week or 2 after, and then it's like, oh, no, we're doing draft stuff.
Right. So you get your awards ceremony, which is somewhere still while the playoffs are going on.
Yeah. Weird.
which is
Awards
kind of
aren't insanely important to talk about right now, I don't think.
no, but you have that in there
Yeah.
as a part of the schedule, which is, like
Yeah.
we've discussed awards in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Your Hart for MVP, your Vezina for best goalie, your stuff
your
like that.
Jack Adams for best coach, et cetera,
Things like that, yeah. And different awards get announced at different points over the course of the season, which is also kind of weird.
Yeah.
But then, you get your week off, give or take, a couple of weeks. And then free agency starts on July 1st, basically every year.
Basically every year. We're going to get back to July 1st finally, it seems.
Yeah. July 1st is free agents, and some, obviously, like most other sports, some classes are better than others.
Some classes are way better than others. We actually had a pretty good class a couple of years ago when the Blue Jackets got Johnny Gaudreau.
Yep. You guys could go watch that too, because that's when we also signed Eric and Brent.
2018 was a high-profile class. John Tavares just recently got 1,000 points. He was the top dog in 2018. He signed that big deal with the Leafs. Like, you see big deals. And, 2019, we mentioned how magical 2019 was. The ending wasn't super magical because the Blue Jackets lost both Sergei Bobrovsky and
Panarin and Duchesne.
Duchesne, yeah, it's more or less. 2019 was a pretty good class.
It was a really good class.
It's funny. It was a really good class, and most of the really high-profile players were from Columbus.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
But then you get into the awards and the lottery and the draft are probably around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get the draft lottery around when the awards are, and that's when you have your bottom 10.
Yeah.
In a ping pong ball lottery.
That's where you find out the big major market who probably doesn't deserve the first overall pick got the first overall pick.
Yeah. And then your small market still picks.
Got the first overall pick 4 times in a 6-year period, or the Rangers got the second overall pick and the first overall pick at back-to-back years, despite being close to being a playoff team.
The Taylor Hall curse and
yeah, or could be something as simple as the Chicago Blackhawks, who, well, we don't want to open up the entire can of worms, but people are pretty upset with the Blackhawks for good reason, and they probably didn't deserve to get the number 1 overall pick, and nobody
did.
Got the first overall pick because the top 3 teams contending for the first overall pick were Chicago, big major market, and then Anaheim and Columbus.
2 very smaller markets.
Yeah.
But we ended up with our guy anyway.
We did. Yeah, we did.
And then you get into the draft, and obviously different draft classes are, stronger than others, just like free agent classes.
This last class for the NHL was ridiculous. It's going to be one of the best draft classes we've seen really for a long time in the National Hockey League. And then this upcoming class, I wouldn't say it's particularly weak, but it's certainly weaker than this past year. Although the class before last year's draft class, mega weak.
In 2022, it was
Now, some of these players are interesting to me, Shimon Nemec is pretty interesting.
Nemec is fun.
Obviously, our guy, Dear Juracek, we love him. Our Gauthier is interesting, but Shane Wright hasn't really done much of anything.
Slav hasn't done a lot in Montreal.
Logan Cooley's really good.
Logan Cooley's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and a lot of that, you gotta kind of be into the minutia of the way hockey development is. And just a quick overview of that, you have your NHL, you have other leagues in Europe like the KHL, the SHL, which are more or less professional and developmental leagues.
Yeah, you got your Finnish Liga, a whole bunch of, there's so many leagues over there. Yeah.
There's the American Hockey League, which is basically like AAA baseball.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
The ECHL, which is basically like double-ish.
I don't even know if I would say it's like double because players rarely make it out of there. It's connected, but it's
a connected league, but it's still like meh.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's almost independent baseball,
Kind of. Which, speaking of the E, I'm wearing 2010 Kelly Cup champion Matt Pierce.
Nice. was gonna say, oh, then you got your major junior leagues over in Canada. You've got your QMJHL, that's the Quebec Major Junior. You got the OHL, that's the
Ontario, and W, which is the Western.
And then you also have the USHL, which is, a smaller program in the United States.
The development team program in the US.
Then a lot of those players will typically go from there to play college hockey.
From the USHL, yes.
Difference between hockey and other sports. Football, you play college football and then you get drafted. Basketball, you play college basketball, you get drafted. Same with baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Hockey is the one where you can be drafted, and then after you get drafted, you can still play college. We did that with Kent Johnson, right?
With Gavin Brindley as well.
Gavin, too.
Gavin Brindley this year is still in Michigan.
So we drafted, these guys. We did with Werenski too.
Did Werenski stay?
Werenski played a year, and then you know why I know this? Because he joined the Monsters late.
Before right.
So you draft a player while they're either while they're playing college hockey or right before they go to college. If you don't sign them to their entry level deal, you retain their rights, but they play college hockey, which is actually and for them to develop. It's actually really effective.
There's a whole other thing with not just getting your entry level deals signed, which are basic 3-year minimum deals at a certain salary. Mm-hmm. But then you also, with everybody else, with the free agents, with everything that's in the off season, there is no salary cap.
Yeah.
Which the cap is a whole other thing where you have your three out of the 4 major sports follow like a hard cap system. The NHL, the NBA, and the NFL all follow basically a hard cap system.
But this is the hardest out of all of them. The NFL's cap basically doesn't exist because you can offset money and change contracts and do a whole bunch of BS to try and just move money around. Mm-hmm. NBA, you can be like way, way over the cap. You're just basically paying a luxury tax, but there is limits on slots for players in terms of max contracts and stuff like that. The NHL, you cannot go over the cap. Unless it's the off season or unless you're circumventing the cap through LTIR, which is another whole can of worms.
Yeah.
You cannot go over the cap.
Which we're also set to go to about an 86 million in a couple years' time.
Which is good.
86, 87 million. So we're finally starting to see money from those lost games, which is why some of these classes more recently have been weaker than others because they missed a lot of development time due to the world stopping.
Yeah, I think there are players who came into the league around that time that struggled because of it. One of them being Alexis Lafreniere.
Yes. Even Shane Wright.
Shane Wright especially.
A lot of those guys lost a lot of their development time. But yes, you have to follow the cap to a T, right?
Yeah.
And there are ways to get around that with the LTIR shenanigans, and we can talk about, like, now that you know the basics of how the league runs, you can kind of understand us talking about it more.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I will say, for if you're a casual fan, right, and you have a friend that's more like us, and they want to take you to a game,
go.
You go.
Go.
The best way that you can learn the sport is by watching it.
By watching it, yeah. And you know what happens when you go to a hockey game and you think, oh, this is actually kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
Watch a game on TV and hear the commentators talk about things. How I learned.
Right.
Unfortunately, Bally Sports kind of screws with that. But I miss the old days. I learned about hockey in an era where all I had to do was stay up, get my homework done early, so I can watch the 7 or 7:30 game on Versus. Not even NBC Sports. It was still Versus at that.
Still Versus.
I miss those days.
Oh yeah. The versus days were the days where my
Dude.
stepdad would flip it to a hunting show.
Dude, versus was the best because it was just, not only did you get the one game at like 7 or 7:30, maybe even 8, you almost always got another game right after it, like on the West Coast at like 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I watched so many Kings games in 2010, 2011 because of it.
Oh man. Well, you know what? All our hardcores out there, show this to your casual friends. We did our best.
Yeah.
We're just two schmucks. I hate to bring back an old reference, but we're just two schmucks schmidtballing.
Yeah. We are, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. But we love doing it, and we love you guys. We love the sport. We really do.
We do. All right, I'm gonna get some fucking dinner.
This has been Hockey 101. Class dismissed. We'll see y'all when we see y'all next.
Jake Jackets, a podcast for fifth liners and all puckheads around. Follow the guys on Twitter at Snake Garinger, GARRINGER, and at by J Ashdown. And subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen. March on.